Jason Prebble.
It's showtime, boys and girls, and what an exciting time. If you didn't get up to see that race last week, you missed it. Go to MSVR, Google it, YouTube, watch these races. They were exciting. Wow. Jason Pribble, what a job. What a job of racing. Fantastic.
Yeah. The expectations were high, obviously, but they weren't high, or they weren't that high for most of the people with our team. They wanted me to do well. They wanted me to be competitive. At the beginning of the year, before I had gotten into the car, team owner Phil said, listen, it might take you a minute to get used to the car, used to the tires. Like maybe by the, fifth race being, 2 races per weekend. Mm-hmm. So maybe by the 3rd round, you'll, start running up at the front. But no, we just decided it was a rough day on Friday, but, changed tires, did a little bit of setup change, worked with the brake bias was our biggest issue. Got into it, put it in second, won the first race. So yeah, it was a good weekend.
you had well, and we'll get to the race in just a second. When you were in on Friday, when you were working with the car, did you have any problems with exhaust or anything like that, or any problem with tires locking up or anything, or was there any problems other than what you just mentioned on Friday?
Of course, the first round we had a loose bolt on the exhaust, and about halfway through the practice, which was only 20 minutes, I had to pull in because it was starting to make some weird noises. And these Kent engines are already pretty finicky. I know we've talked about them. You over rev them, and they get, they gum up the valves and something breaks in them, and there goes the whole engine, right? So pulled in, we tightened up the exhaust, but of course the vibrations from it being loose, we weren't able to replace the exhaust in time. So we went out and then it cracked. So I had to pull in during the second practice. So I didn't get full track time on Friday, and we were battling, just trying to get used to the setup and trying to figure out the car. Thankfully, Gavin has already done a crazy amount of time with these cars and, working on setup. So we knew we were pretty close going into the weekend, but there were some things on the car like brake bias, which it's up to driver preference. And we haven't, adjusted that since Snetterton, which was our only other test. So, we were still chasing some things here and there, but Friday was eventful, to say the least.
But then you're talking, when you say Gavin, you're talking about Gavin Ray of Ray Race Cars, who supplies the car. And wow, run over a couple of words that Chris, and I believe his name was Ian, they were the announcers, for the races. I believe his name was Ian. I couldn't exactly catch it, but they said words like cracking job, knows how to drive a racing car, looking pretty strong, and they were talking about you as you were, going through that first race. And the other thing that kind of caught, my attention was that American accent. You just don't get that often. But I think I think you surprised the announcers too, although one of them did say that he thought that you looked good in qualifying, and you came in second in qualifying, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I surprised a lot of people, both in the paddock, right? It's one thing to be fast, and it's another thing to be completely comfortable around other cars and in a new style of racing. I mentioned this 1 or 2 podcasts ago, where the style of racing in Europe is completely different. It's close quarters, rules are a bit different here and there. You know, we can bump into each other here and there. That doesn't happen in the US. So the fact that I was able to stay completely comfortable, I was complimented on a number of occasions. And it's a big deal to win races in any European Formula car. And to be doing that in your first race, first event, things like that it's not common. So, you know, it turned some heads for sure.
And the other first that there were a couple of other firsts that you had. The first time you had a standing start, and the first time that you had a restart. Those were a couple of firsts that you had also, and did quite well.
Yeah, the standing start was frightening at first. Of course, you know, we wanted to get some practice standing starts in before the first round. We were planning on doing. I mean, I think we talked about it. Snetterton was rough. We didn't get as much track time as we would have wanted, so we focused on driving rather than anything else. So I didn't get the time to do a standing start then. Silverstone, the same issue. We didn't get as much track time as we would have liked, so we just wanted to focus on putting laps in. And the race right before mine, I was standing just along the pit lane, and I recorded the lights just to get an idea of what the start procedure was, because not only have I never been in a standing start at one of these events, I had never even seen one. So I was kind of in the dark about it, but I talked to my coach, Linton, and, you know, I got a good idea of where the slip of the clutch was, what RPM to be going at, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful start. It was amazing.
Going in, I think it was that first turn, which was very significant. That first, I believe it was the first turn where the two lead cars got kind of hooked up, and it was, again, you had to see the race because it was phenomenal. All of these things that you had going on, and you did what reflexes you had to get around those guys and take the lead. That was phenomenal, just amazing.
Yeah, I think part of reflexes in racing is just knowing what's going to happen. And, you know, there's a bit of anticipation with a lot of things. When you're sitting in the car, you can tell, you know, if the rear end's about to snap loose, you know it's going to happen right before it happens. So it looks very impressive. But it was kind of the same story with this. These two guys were fighting like crazy, fighting like it was the last lap every single lap. And we weren't even halfway through the race. And I knew to expect that it was going to be rough. I'm a newcomer into Formula Ford. I was told, expect to get bullied out there. And they were just bullying each other. And I was comfortable sitting and watching. And I knew once they were going into that corner, there was a bit of oil on the track. And I saw it coming. And I just made sure to go a little bit wide, give them a little bit of room. And it was perfect timing.
And you did an excellent job. That was phenomenal. And then you took the lead, and then you held the lead. That was about 4 minutes in, I think, when this particular thing happened.
Yeah, something like that. 4 or 5 minutes in, I think we were pretty deep into, you know, the first half of the race for sure.
But you got the lead, and you retained the lead. You kept it. The only mistake that you made was you missed the turn to go into the, you know, after you won the race.
Yeah.
Don't mean to embarrass you, but I know.
No, you know, I think a lot of people think it was a mistake. I'd like to clear this up now.
Okay.
In the driver's meeting, we were instructed in the case of a red flag to go to the back of the paddock or to the back of the grid and wait for further instructions from the marshals. I went to the back of the grid. Everyone else went into pit lane. So I was the only one that followed instructions. But since I was the only one who did it, it looked like I had done something wrong. But I, listened to what the driver's meeting had to say, and, it all worked out. I was worried I was going to get some sort of penalty, but I thought to myself, there's no way because I'm the only one that followed instructions. So,
well, yeah. The only penalty they would have given you was maybe going on the grass because there was a keep off the grass sign there.
Yeah.
But it was, and they were very, again, complimentary for the things that you had accomplished. The announcers, Chris and Ian, I think it was, again, in your interview, you were a little embarrassed, and you said you had some issues with your technical your board.
Yeah. Yeah. So our data system started going, I think in qualifying we had some issues with the GPS sensor and things like that. Nothing big, but it was a precursor to some more interesting things. So we had turned off the warning lights for both my oil and water temperature, or oil pressure and water temperature. And we turned them on for the race. And of course, for the race, the dashboard started going crazy. The numbers were jumping all over the place, and the warning lights were going on. And I looked at my dash and I looked at my water temp, and it said -11C. And I was like, I'm leading this race by 2 seconds. If it blows up, it blows up. But I'm pretty sure this is just the dash going wrong. So I took it, and I was just, there's nothing to lose at this point, right? So yeah.
Well, another interesting first too, that and a difference between U.S. racing and UK racing is that in America you can have an earphone, or you can have some contact with your lead guy, your lead engineer, and over there you got this board that you got to look at as you're flying by, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was something really to get used to. And we hadn't even used that at Snetterton. So the first time I got to see that was in qualifying. And, we have secret codes and whatnot on the boards that are different from team to team. So I had to learn those as well. But it's interesting. I find it nice to be able to drive on my own, except when things like that happen. And I would rather talk to my team and figure out what's going on or figure out what I should do. But it's part of, growing as a driver, I think, is being able to make those decisions. And so I'm happy to be able to, develop that skill.
What were you talked earlier about expectations and what other people were expecting? If you just finished the race, they would have been happy, type of thing. What was your expectation?
My expectation, I always, ever since I've really started cars, my expectation has been to win, because I figure that, unless I'm testing, or unless it's, unless there's really no way I could win the race, right? Be it I'm hopping in a Formula One car somehow, and I'm where I'm at right now. My expectation is to win, because if I'm not there to win, then I'm not, like, what am I doing there, right? That's the mindset I go into every weekend. So, my plan is to win. My expectation is to win, no more, no less. So
losing is not one of your options.
No, it certainly isn't. And that comes with the ladder series and Formula cars as a whole, right? Everyone who's gotten to Formula One, the really good guys at the top, they won their first years in Formula cars, every single one of them. And that's just the culture that we have. And I mean, that's why they're the best of the best. And I'd like to be part of that.
Well, we finished with race one. You got your trophy. And so we go on to race two a little bit later. And again, people need to see it, to see how outstanding. It's one of the finest races I've seen. I thought you, and I think the guy's name was Ames, put on a heck of a show, because he was, they call it ghosting. Is that where he's on your tail? Do I have that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just right behind,
Wow,
watching and waiting.
Myself. Yes. It's what now?
Watching and waiting.
I see.
Yeah.
And you started out again. You started out in first place in the second race, and yet it didn't seem like you had it as well as you did in the first race. But heck of a race.
Yeah, it was a mix of emotions for me, for sure. I had spun the wheels on the start line, so I had lost out to second place, which was Ames, and it was just a matter of keeping him off of me as much as possible. I knew, and he had spoken about this after the race with me, but I knew that if I had gotten out of the tow, a second and a half away from him, I would have been able to just run away. He didn't really have the pace compared to me without being in my draft, right? So he had to stick with me, and I really wanted to break the toe because I just didn't want to have that option, right? I didn't want to have the risk of a second place car being, being behind me for the last lap. And so while I went into that with the mindset of this is my race to lose because, the people who qualified all around me aren't in this race or they're starting in the back, I really wanted to just break away. And so I pushed a little too hard a couple of times, went wide in cops, and got a track limits penalty. So that was great.
A couple of things. What is toe? You said something about toe.
Toe is just like the draft. So these cars, since they're wingless and all sorts of aerodynamic stuff, they punch a hole in the air, right? And the first car that punches a hole in the air punches a hole in the air for the second car. So the second car doesn't have to push through any air, so they're going to have way more straight line speed. It's sort of like a goose flying V formation. The aerodynamics of it are exactly the same. It makes it easier to fly, makes the car go faster.
And let me clarify: you didn't lose the second race. You won. You came in first.
Yes,
but you had a penalty, a track limit penalty. What is that?
Yeah, so with track limits around a lot of European circuits, there's only one or two even in the US that have this. But since European circuits have different grades, there's I guess what we call them parking lots, where you have to stay in the lines. And then on the outside of the corner is just concrete, right? It's not a wall, it's just track. In the US, there's usually just grass, so track limits doesn't exist because it's self-punishing. But I went wide and got all four wheels over the line or the limits of the track, and you get a penalty for that after 3 infractions. So
what? So you had 3 infractions. You actually done that 3 times? Is that correct?
Yes? Yeah.
And they subtracted a second and a half, I think it was.
5 seconds.
5 seconds. Oh,
yeah.
Wow. So you, even though you came in first, they put you back to third because of the 5-second penalty.
Yes, which I'm lucky to have. That was to be able to get away from the rest of the pack by 5 seconds was good. I knew once Ames started battling with me, I needed to kind of pick my fights carefully and make sure I wasn't losing time to the pack behind or the cars coming up. So, yeah.
And they also, as I was watching that race, I'm thinking, well, why didn't they let him know? And again, we go back to, because they don't have any contact with you except with that board, right?
Yeah, I actually did know pretty early on in the race. I never got any warnings. I just immediately got the penalty, which I wasn't thrilled about, but
nothing you can do about it.
Exactly, right. It's what's done is done, and I did still exceed the track limits, and I knew I had exceeded the track limits. So, what can you do, really?
You said one of the other drivers talked to you about your ghosting or your efforts during the race. Was that Ames or was that somebody else?
It's a common thing to talk to drivers, especially the ones you're racing with on track. Just talk to them about how the race went. Usually they're nice, no complaints as long as you're doing things right and you're clean driver. It's usually just, hey, congrats, oh, you got me there, things like that. So I talked to Ames and Rockstraw and just a couple other drivers that I knew.
They seemed, as I looked at the winners podium, they seemed to be maybe 2, 3, 4 years older than you. And they have a lot of experience on those tracks over in the UK, correct?
Yeah, a fair number of the Formula Ford drivers here are, lifetime Formula 4 drivers, or Ford drivers, excuse me. The Rackstraw has been running Formula Ford for about 4 years, and he races Formula Ford for the Walter Hayes Trophy, which is at Silverstone at the end of the year in the same layout. So he only does the Silverstone races. And so he's got a lot of experience on that track and in that car. So it's quite an accomplishment to be able to beat him. And same with Ames. I mean, he's been running for a very long time. A lot of the people are on their third or second year. There were a lot of kids my age, a little further back, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. That big pack that we saw in the stream, that was some of my age group and some of my class. But yeah, lots of experience in this field.
And one other first is that you are in first. You are atop the leaderboard in the series.
Yeah, we're all pretty happy about that. We have a Ray 1-2-3 right now leading the championship, so it's working out great for us at the moment, and I'm looking forward to the next rounds. You know, it's I have a comfortable lead, and I'm feeling really confident going into the next rounds. Obviously,
Next round,
and
you're talking
yeah,
about Donington.
yes,
Donington
yeah,
race.
Donington.
Have you seen it yet?
I've seen the layout, yes. I've never been, and I won't go until that race weekend. But it was the same story with Silverstone, and I'll be watching data, watching video, things like that throughout the next few weeks, trying to get myself, as knowledgeable as I can about the track.
Does it have some hills, or isn't it a little bit different type of track with some hills? And is there hairpin turns, or did they take that out? Because I noticed they could have, made it
There's
just.
a few layouts. We don't have the hairpin in our layout. We have the chicane, but Donington is my type of track. Silverstone not as much, and I did pretty well there. But I love the tracks with elevation change. You float over the middle of the corner, things like that. So that's one of the reasons I'm really looking forward to it. It's a track that I admire, and it's one that I'm excited to race at for sure.
Did you talk to Phil Wills after the races?
Oh yeah, of course. It was mostly just debrief. I'm just that type of person. We talk about where how we could have done better. What setup changes we made and if they helped, things like that. And yeah, that's just what racing is. You lose and you figure out why you lost, or you win and you figure out why you won. That's just how it is. So yeah.
Also, a couple of other things in your area of you talked about earlier in one of the interviews. You like chicken. Have you found a chicken restaurant?
I usually just cook my chicken at home. I have a tendency to not trust. I don't trust restaurants very often when it comes to foods and things like that, just because I like having control over my calories and my intake of, my portions for the day, things like that. Chicken is just very high in protein and low in fat, which is perfect for a racing driver because, especially for Formula Ford, you need to be able to fit in the car. You need to be the right weight for the car. And, they're physical, so you need to have as much muscle mass as possible while still being light. And the best way to do that is by staying lean. So chicken
Yeah.
is one of the best options. Yeah.
Do you have a special recipe?
No, it changes every day. I don't want to do just like salt, pepper, and garlic every day, but some days it's, nice and easy. Just cook with what I have.
And I understand you have transportation now. You got yourself a nice car.
Nice is a term for sure. We well, I got it, and then 4 days later it broke down.
Oh,
But we took it to the shop. It got fixed up, and it made the drive to Snetterton, which is about 2.5 hours. So, it's been nice. It's certainly good to have because I'm able to get to tracks all throughout the weekend, things like that. Yeah, it's a big advantage to have something like that, and it's a requirement for what I'm doing this time around.
a little unusual to drive on the other side of the road.
Uh, you know, I think I was lucky enough to be able to watch my dad drive for a little while first and kind of get myself used to it. I haven't had any problems yet, so it's been relatively easy to get accustomed to the driving here.
A lot of exciting things going on, and I'm sure there's some more to come. Well, I think that a couple of things that I'd like to say, and that is that I noticed they didn't have the qualifying. I got up at 5 o'clock for you. I want you to know that, okay? And so did
Yeah,
your grandmother. Your grandmother got up at 5 o'clock, and she had a trip to make to Urbandale, Illinois. But anyway, they didn't have the qualifying, so I keep waiting. And while I'm waiting, I noticed that there's like 180 people that were waiting with me. There were people waiting to see the races, and they didn't get on until like about 8:45. But people should really look at MSVR. I mean, it's on YouTube. It's real easy to get to. Google it. Not a major, and it's great racing. And by the way, the race is after you guys too, with the old cars, the Corvettes and the Hondas, and that was kind of cute. But there is some exciting racing. You guys did a heck of a job.
Yeah, it's really, really nice to finally have something like that where it's consistent television and it's consistent, really great commentary, as you mentioned. It's something that I feel like helps out a series so much and helps out a driver so much in a lot of different ways. So, I'm really happy. That's a huge, huge advantage this year.
Well, I think it also helps out Ray Race Cars and Phil Wills Racing and to Jason Pribble Autosports. You guys did a great job. Heck of a race. Both of them were great races and really enjoyed it. Best to you. Have yourself a good day, a good week, and look forward to seeing you on the track real soon.
Thank you.
You bet. Everybody, have a good day.